as I said, all major projects are mandated to use BIM, and it's not only BIM for design and construction, but actually building from BIM.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge difference than what kind of we've seen and learned from the US market, is that BIM in the US has kind of been more of an office thing, that you do clash, you do planning, you do your quantities and so on. But when we talk about BIM in Norway, it's as much about BIM in the field. And the reason for that is that the numbers show that on average you have a cost overrun of around 20% in a project if you just use 2D data. That's what the numbers say, unfortunately. If you use
It's modest.
if you use 3D design and then you build from 2D, so 2D drawings, that's where I would say the majority of the market is. They use BIM or 3D at some stage of a project. You have an average cost of around 10%. But if you build from BIM, and that's what we're currently doing in Norway now, your average cost overrun goes down to 5%.
We talked about it a long time ago, but it's like it's kind of getting there. And I'll date myself, but like I feel like it's like a Doc Brown quote, like where we're going, there are no roads. I feel like where we're going, there are no drawings. Like,
hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. In construction, precision matters. Every budget line, every schedule, every document. But too often, project data is scattered across tools and departments, creating risky silos. That's where ArcDesk comes in. ArcDesk is the all-in-one construction management platform designed to connect your entire project operation, from opportunity through to tender, all the way to handover. With real-time dashboards, cost control, scheduling, procurement, and document management in one place, ArcDesk gives you complete visibility and control. Trusted by contractors, subcontractors, and asset owners worldwide, ArcDesk has powered landmark projects from shopping centers to Europe's tallest buildings. If you're ready to reduce risk, protect your margins, and deliver projects with confidence, discover ArcDesk today. Visit arcdesk.com, that's ARCH desk.com, and see how leading firms are building smarter with ArcDesk. Tore and Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion about Procore, and Dave is representing Procore today. Nice t-shirt, says Procore BIM team, which might give away a bit of the conversation, and Procore's acquisition of Tore's company, NovaRender. So thanks for coming, guys, and looking forward to diving into this with you today. I'm going to kick this off with a little bit of a heavy hitting question for you. And maybe, Dave, you will go back to Wyatt and ask why he made me put you on the spot here. But hey, here we go. So Wyatt said he's the Chief Product Officer at Procore, and he said to be the leading construction platform, we have to win BIM. So Dave, from Procore side, what does winning BIM mean in practice? How do you win BIM?
how do you win BIM? BIM is dead, apparently. But like, how do we win it now that it's dead? Yeah, I mean, our product strategy, you think about like Procore, we've got over 17,000 companies that we support across the world. Some do BIM, some don't. Maybe we'll talk about that today. But when it comes to winning BIM, we have folks that are doing small TI fit outs, and we have people that are building the biggest, most complex projects in the world on our platform. So when it comes to BIM, a lot of times they're the ones that are building these really complicated projects are the ones that are using BIM, and they're pushing the limits. And so when it comes to winning BIM, we have to support every one of those 17,000 if they're doing BIM, from the smallest projects to the biggest projects. So any type of project, any size, and really anywhere in the world, right? And so when it comes to winning BIM, I would say it's achieving that and being able to support these 17,000 as we expand into these other markets, and as these projects get more and more complex, that we're right there beside the platform from all the tools that you're using across Procore that we're also supporting from the BIM side. So I would say that's winning BIM for us.
Every single project possible. And I'm guessing that's made a little bit easier by the acquisition of NovaRender. So yeah, maybe Dave, why acquiring NovaRender? Like rather than maybe you thought also at the time, I'm not sure how involved you personally were, but about building an internal solution for the problem that NovaRender solves.
Yeah. I talked about this. We had an innovation summit. I talked about this a little bit at length. But when it came to the acquisition of NovaRender, and I will brag on my team too, the internal team, and now it's grown, and now I've got like a mega team. But I'm blessed to work with some of the most talented engineers in the company. We did a lot of soul searching when it came to BIM, and we're saying like, okay, like, can we build this? Can we achieve that winning BIM? Any type of project, any size, anywhere in the world, can we do it? And the answer was yes. Like, we could. It would just be maybe longer than we wanted, right, to do that. And honestly, I think Tore may talk about it today. We were talking last week, and he had a really good example of like, you almost have to start from scratch. You have to rethink the process to really achieve what Tore and team have done. And so we're really wrestling with it. And we also thought about the other direction of like, which I say is like going backwards of like, well, when you open up one of these really big projects, we'll just give you that error that says, hey, for the best thing, open this on desktop, the best experience. And we were like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, we can't go back like desktop. We cannot. We are a cloud-based platform. Like, it's got to be on the cloud, right? So, and obviously, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point, but AI and this agentic world, you want to be able to leverage that data across the platform. You want to stay on the platform. You want to stay in the cloud connecting this information. So desktop was moving backwards for us. And so we really took a hard look, did a lot of research for over a year. I started conversations with Tore pretty early and was like, hey, I heard about you. Yeah, let's get on a call and talk. And it was awesome because maybe we'll talk about it too, about, the when it comes to an acquisition, like, culture is so important and the people are so important. And it was the first call. I was like, I mean, I love this guy.
That's
cool. Like, we connected on such a deep level, and it was like, this makes so much sense. How do we make this happen? And so, it was pretty clear that for a number of reasons, to really achieve that, any type of project, any size, anywhere in the world, that NovaRender was going to play a big role in that, if we could make it happen. So.
I think maybe I was going to save this question for later, but people were probably wondering like, what actually NovaRender, like, why, what was so attractive about it? Like, what does it do within the BIM process, which made it a no-brainer?
Tore, I'll answer from the Procore side of like what it was, is that from a technical standpoint, and most people in the 3D space that are working on the browser know this, there's a 2 gig limit on the browser. And you have to get really creative when you want to surpass that 2 gig limit. What used to be, a big model was like 150 to 500 megs. That used to be a big model. That is not a big model anymore for these companies. Like, a big model is multi-gig. So you're forced to figure out how to get past the 2 gig limit. And there are multiple ways to do it. And Tore Squared figured out a very elegant way to solve it. And so when he opened up an infrastructure project that was like 50 miles long and was just like cruising through it, I was like, okay, like this, he's onto something.
Yeah, that's smart.
So that's really that's kind of the test, is like that 2 gig limit. Really, it's how creative you can get past that limit.
Nice. Tore, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, exactly like they kind of went into, and thanks first of all for having us and having me.
Of course.
So there are kind of many ways in looking at problems, right? And I think what we did correctly in NoVRender, maybe not from a very like businessy perspective and kind of let's build a startup fast and grow it fast and all that stuff, but I'm kind of a huge nerd and have kind of been dabbling with computers and programming and all that since high school, and spent a lot of time kind of on the like core fundamental, just doing stuff for the sake of building and creating stuff just for the sake of creating. And to me, kind of to really understand something, I had to build it. Like I had a period where I was kind of into analyzing stocks and so on. You have all of these different methods of doing that, but I never understood them before you kind of went down and just implemented them yourself in code and kind of really understood it. So the inspiration for NovaRender kind of actually came from a company I was working previously in oil and gas. And when I joined that company after high school, in Norway you often have like a skip year after high school before you go into uni. And I kind of never got into uni, but I did a skip year until there.
Cheated the system.
So so um so I started there, and they had this kind of very traditional approach, and it's the same approach that you'll see in most desktop viewers on the market right now. It's in a very different industry, but philosophically it's very similar. So they'd essentially created this kind of Google Street View kind of thing, but for oil and gas wells. So you had this special camera, you put it down like these 10-kilometer, like down to the deep sea and ocean, to check for leakages and so on in oil and gas wells. So really high temperature, high pressure. And to kind of create that Google Street View look and feel, so you can actually pan and zoom and tilt around like you can in Google Street View, you need to use GPUs, and you need some graphical compute to do that. And so they built this like traditional application like most viewers are, and had kind of made that better and incremental improvements and faster and all that. But what kind of started happening was that we do these scans of a well, and an operation like this takes like 24 hours. It costs like tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. It's like a really expensive operation. And then nobody would see the data other than like a couple people, because they needed a memory stick with the video, and they needed another memory stick with the application, and install that on their computers. And even if they had that memory stick with that application, they weren't allowed to install it on their computers. So a lot of the time we would bring them a computer and just give them a laptop and say, hey, here's a laptop with your video and pre-installed application, because these big companies weren't allowed to install our application. So kind of my approach when we came in to that company was that, hey, we really need to fix this problem, and I don't think we can do it iteratively. Right. So it's the same with the current viewers, right? I don't think you can kind of just commit some new piece of code to the same kind of repo and it gradually just kind of evolve. You need to think differently. And then we moved all of that to be cloud driven and so on. So that instead of having that laptop, you'd just send the customer a link and they could go into web page. This was back in like 2014, 15. So having high compute web apps at that time using a GPU and so on through the browser was very new. There was an enabling technology that just came, something called WebGL, just around that time. So we were kind of lucky with that timing. Then the idea kind of came, let's do this for 3D in general, like not just this Google Street View kind of thing for oil and gas, but like in general, can we make an application that you can literally just upload as much data as you want, any data, any format, and it just works. That's it. That was kind of the simple pitch. And we started building we kind of started thinking like, what's the biggest thing in the world kind of that we can imagine? And that's kind of the universe. So we kind of always had that. Our slogan back in the days was render the universe. That was kind of what we're going at. So we had some vision and some aspirations to what we wanted to achieve. And when you start with that, you really start with the core fundamentals and really looking at the problem extremely differently than what had been done historically. And that's kind of what gave Dave that aha moment when he kind of saw that for the first time running in the browser, and you could just like hit enter and it just opens a model hundreds of gigabytes in seconds through the browser. No installation, no fuzz, it just works. That's kind of, we just wanted that. We just wanted that kind of Apple feeling. It just works kind of.
Yeah, it's super simple. Like that's how it should be, I think. And they don't need to overcomplicate anything here. Tore, we'll get into a little bit more of the acquisition a bit later, but I'm curious before we do go there. Was there any, walk me through your mind decision making process to partner with Procore or even and take the acquisition from Procore? Why not go alone and continue building?
So like when you're a founder and you kind of build a technology, you have different reasons for building, right? And my vision for the company and our vision before acquired by Procore was 3D for all. That was kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to democratize 3D data. BIM wasn't, I don't even know I knew the word BIM when we started. I did not know the word BIM when we started the company. I don't know if it even kind of existed mainstream, but BIM wasn't in my mind. But more in an even more general sense, like that was our vision, that we wanted to create a solution that would democratize 3D for all. And the company was started in 2016 and went through many iterations and kind of became commercial in 2020 when we started getting the first customers. I can go into much more detail here maybe later on, but just to go to your question, we had a lot of commercial success very quickly in the Nordics due to mandates and different kind of market reasons. But you come to a certain point where it's less about kind of building a product and a technology, and it's much more about distributing that out to the world. We knew we had a gold nugget. We'd been running this on the biggest projects in the world, and we'd outcompeted all of the major players. Like all of the major players compete in Norway. It's kind of been a proving ground for BIM because it's just kind of become this fun place where everybody comes to kind of show off their latest and greatest. And we beat all of the mainstream players, and we knew we had a gold nugget. And then you can kind of go one of two ways. You can kind of fund it and kind of go all the way, building a huge organization and kind of go through all that, which is a journey in itself. But my thinking was, let's partner up with kind of the greatest company in BIM today and kind of do this together, and with that joint vision of kind of improving the lives of everyone in construction. It really resonates with the same mission that we're on in NovaRender. So instead of kind of trying to go through all the pain and all the kind of stuff you need to do to build a really successful company like Procore is, for myself and kind of where I come from, I'm like, I love tech. I love building stuff. I love kind of all kind of the geeky product side of things, not necessarily kind of being like a leader for many hundreds of people and kind of all the stuff that kind of comes with that. So I felt it was kind of a very natural way of kind of handing over the stick in a sense, right, to somebody who's really good at scaling.
Yeah, nice.
And get it out to everyone, right? So we can actually fulfill the vision of the company, which was 3D for all. And there's no better way of doing that than with kind of the global leader in the industry.
Very nice. Awesome. Okay. This one's for Dave then. So around about the same time-ish, maybe you'll tell me differently, but you also acquired Flypaper, which it's an AI clash detection app for BIM models, right?
What's that?
That Flypaper is specifically designed for BIM models.
It is. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, obviously these acquisitions happened almost simultaneously. So why? Why? What was the reason behind that?
No, why not stack them? Let's just do both of them at the same time and see what happens. Yeah. No, it made a lot of sense. So I think it's just coincidence, right, that they happened at the same time. One is we're investing a lot in BIM. I mean, you quoted Wyatt earlier, but that's all the way, to TUI and everyone. Like BIM is a huge focus for Procore. And so, we had a strategy in place, and we were thinking through the strategy, and we kind of talked about it earlier. I talked about it earlier of like the build by partner strategy. And so we were like, how do we put the pieces together for this? And we have had a partnership with Flypaper for 3 years, right? Nick and I started talking a long time ago, built a partnership, and it has been wonderful for our customers, mutual customers. We've gotten a lot of adoption. We have over 40 of our ENR 400 customers use this every single day. And so that one really just made so much sense to bring in, not only to bolster our current solution and like just make and streamline the workflows. And now it's just like, it's one thing to get Procore versus like, I needed to get Procore and then I got to get this other thing too to really make it work. The partnership is seamless. And so it made a lot of sense to bolster the product now. But the thing that it really is, exciting about it is that Nick, the founder of Flypaper, is an expert in 3D coordination, like expert. He's lived it. He started doing construction when he was a kid. And he's just he's just stayed in construction his whole life and led coordination at Barton Mallow, and he knows it inside and out. And so here's a guy that not only understands every bit of like how it should be done, but has built intelligence around how to do it. And so you combine Flypaper with the power of NovaRender, and you end up with a really powerful coordination solution to support any type of project, any size, anywhere in the world, to be able to coordinate these projects and have that predictability in the field that everybody wants, and that promise of BIM to build it before you build it. Now you can actually start to do that and automate that process. And so, like I said, it's not only, it made a lot of sense for the product now to bolster it, but also to set us up for the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They just happen to happen at the same time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Well, it's serendipity maybe. Do you know how many, this is like a very open question. I don't know if you have the numbers on your head, but like, is there any stats that you can give on like the growth of BIM maybe, or how many projects roughly, like where is it going? Like, is there any sort of proof to show that, oh yeah, BIM usage is growing? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a tough one. So I wrote a textbook, BIM and Construction Management, with Brad Harden, and I remember looking up like BIM adoption at the time, and it had grown from when he originally wrote the book to the second edition we wrote, and we published it in 2015. I think we said that global adoption was like 70% was the quote we had. I think now being on this side and seeing the data, that's a broad spectrum. I feel like that's it's inflated because of who took the survey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
The people that
yeah,
took
yeah.
the survey were people that do BIM, likely. And so when you look at the 17,000 logo plus that we have, and you say, who does BIM? It's a much different picture because we're covering the spectrum of like the small TI, small commercial to like these super complex projects. And so it's a much smaller percentage. It's not 70%, I'll tell you that. It's a much smaller percentage. But I will say that it has grown. And what we're seeing since launching our product, and I guess it launched in 2019, fall of 2019, we've seen year over year it moving more into like a higher percentage each year. And so I would say it's probably not 70%, it's probably between 20 and 30, right? When you look
And
at
the
it.
adoption is very like how they use BIM is so different. Like
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
some companies kind of use BIM, and it's something that other companies might not even consider using BIM. That's just like, hey, you open a model sometimes, like, is that using BIM?
Yeah, and there's plenty of projects that like I love BIM, but like there's plenty of projects that it may not make sense. Like it may make sense on some of these fit outs to like bring the raw materials and fab on site. And so you have some drawings, and I always I look at things like the adoption of AutoCAD still kind of a really important tool and people's tool belt for creating content, because not every project needs BIM, but it's getting easier and easier. So I imagine that percentage is going to go up exponentially now that it's becoming easier to model and create 3D content. So
there's one number that kind of stuck with me. I don't remember the exact reference or what report it was from, but it's in Europe, the amount of BIM data, so like the megabytes of BIM, it grows. It has an annual growth rate of 30% year over year.
Yeah.
So it's really just exploding. And if you look at a market like Norway, where BIM has been mandated, so all projects over, I think it's around 100 million in project value, they are mandated to use BIM if they're for a government. And that started happening in 2016 is kind of when they started with the mandate, and that's what actually got NoVRender into BIM, was that we kind of built this 3D for all viewer that you could upload models to, and it just worked, right? And then we started getting these like construction companies knocking at our doors, because we'd mostly been doing this for oil and gas, actually, because oil and gas is very natural, heavy. It's a very like heavy asset industry here in the west coast of Norway, where I'm from. And then we started getting these civil companies coming over, like, hey, we saw this news article about NovaRender. Can we use that for our roads and tunnels and what have you? And we're like, sure, but you really need it. There are viewers like all over the place. They're free. You can just go and have them. And then they sent us the data, and then we see, hey, shit, this is where the game's at. Like BIM is where it's at. Those models were on par with some of the bigger assets that we had in oil and gas.
Oh, wow.
And that mandate has just been reinforced and reinforced. And now, as I said, all major projects are mandated to use BIM. And it's not only BIM for this design and construction, but actually building from BIM. And that's a huge difference than what kind of we've seen and learned from the US market, is that BIM in the US has kind of been more of an office thing, that you do clash, you do planning, you do your quantities and so on. But when we talk about BIM in Norway, it's as much about BIM in the field. And the reason for that is that the numbers show that on average you have a cost overrun of around 20% in a project if you just use 2D data. That's what the numbers say, unfortunately. If you use
it's
3D
modest.
design, if you use 3D design and then you build from 2D, so 2D drawings, that's where I would say the majority of the market is. They use BIM or 3D at some stage of the project. You have an average cost of around 10%. But if you build from BIM, and that's what we're currently doing in Norway now, your average cost overrun goes down to 5%. So there are kind of huge monetary gains of actually going all in BIM and doing it throughout your entire life cycle. And the biggest reason and what they're trying to cut out is so when you have a project that's BIM based, so you're building your model in 3D, the 2D data is kind of a derivative of the 3D model, right? So you first make a model, and then you create drawings out of that model afterwards, and that's what you distribute to the field. But models change, but your drawings don't change automatically, at least in a very efficient and simple way. So what's happening is that engineers go in and change the model, but the guys in the field still have that drawing laying around, or they forgot to update the drawing and things happen. And that's what they want to cut out completely. And so there's one single source of truth, and that's the BIM data. And then we, of course, have spent a bunch of time in trying to produce these 2D views. So creating a drawing, but doing it directly from the BIM model. And that's something that Procore has really gotten right, because you can use the BIM data as a single source of truth, but you still give the guy in the field what he's used to. And that's more a 2D approach of viewing the data. And that's where I really see the magic is kind of BIM being this silo for all of the information, but the way that people view that data, they might view it in 3D, they might view it in 2D, they might even just view it as a list, a building of materials, or maybe a virtual document, an asset of a chair, or what have you. So, and Dave, you can probably go into much more about this in your guys' journey in Procore, but that's where I really see the cool parts of BIM is being able to produce the data that people actually need to do their daily jobs in a very efficient way.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to Owen, also going back to the adoption that I didn't mention, because you asked about projects, I think, like number of projects adopting, and I talked more about companies. As it relates to projects, I have noticed a trend of adoption there with companies that use BIM. So let's say it's the 30% that are using BIM. Those companies in the last call it 5 years, 10 years, have gone from like, hey, we do BIM on like 20% of our projects, to like now it's like when you ask those companies how many of your projects do BIM, you're getting like 80 to 100%, because they're like, it just makes so much sense because of everything Tore just said. Like they've started to realize the value of modeling even on the smallest projects. And so they're like, so what you saw is like, even though from a macro level, the BIM adoption at a logos and company level is not this what we had pictured or what we wrote, like 70%, but the ones that are doing BIM are adopting it, on the smallest to the largest projects, because they see the value of BIM. So I think that is a unique trend that has happened, that it's just becoming so obvious for these companies to be like, yeah, we model every project because we know it's going to save us on the back end. So,
I mean, it's a good sign if the numbers are going up once people have tried it and they're not just getting rid of it after trying it. It probably proves that the using BIM is actually truly beneficial to people's operation within the industry. So that's good to see. Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
In terms of like the acquisition, going back to that point, how much of like because obviously we know through the industry that Procore's on like a growth charge within the European region. How much of this like acquisition is associated with like growing Procore within this region of Europe?
It has an impact, it definitely has an impact. When we think about the in particular, like the mandates past 1192 and ISO 19650, and like making sure we're compliant with not just 1 and 2, but 3, 4, and above, you start to think about like, well, how do we support that for these BIM mandates? And as that gets, as more and more people adopt the ISO standards, and so it definitely weighed in the factor. I mean, one of the things that Tore and team have figured out, which is like IDS and like rule-based checking of metadata, so that if you've got an owner requirement for information and you load this file in, it automatically checks the metadata of the file and says, hey, these don't meet the standard, and flags them for you, so you can add that metadata. Now, where other tools are like, well, we're looking at ISO 19651 and 2, where does the file name match the standard for naming convention? That's like the first level. That's not that's not all the other ISOs, right? So it definitely played a factor, because again, the way that NovaRender thought about this, the IFC was a huge focus, where maybe NWD was our huge focus in the States as a file. And so they know the ins and outs of IFC. They also know a lot around this standardization and these government mandates. And so it definitely helps again, accelerate some of those areas that we were weak on with our product.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm going to read out an excerpt from an article that I found as well. And I think it's interesting to hear, Dave, your thoughts on this. So Procore's acquisition, these are the quotes behind quotes, right? So Procore's acquisition of BIM-focused startups, NovaRender and Flypaper, along with Autodesk's continued investment in generative AI for 3D shape creation, are not random. They represent a concerted effort to move left in the project lifecycle. As job site execution tools become more commoditized, the real defensible value and the most valuable data is created in a digital loop that connects design, engineering, and fabrication. By acquiring these capabilities, the incumbents are attempting to build a data moat early in the process, making their platforms essential to a project before a single shovel ever hits the ground. This is a strategic necessity to secure future growth and fend off both legacy competitors and a new wave of challengers. The question is, do you agree? Are you moving more left? And does the competitive edge come from owning the data like from day one?
I want Tore's take on this one. But I guess, yeah, do I agree? Somewhat. I mean, somewhat. But when I hear like, well, NovaRender and Flypaper and the investment in AI and 3D, like generative design, like those are, I don't view those in the same light.
Yeah,
right?
That's a bit strange. Yeah.
You talk about the AI and 3D, and you've got like an influx of folks that are doing that, right? There's a new one coming up every day, and I'm talking to a lot of them, but there's a lot in that space of like, now we can just prompt and like make a building, and now we can do designs very quickly. And that's what it gets back to, like, it's getting easier to author 3D content. So yeah, that's happening. And so people are able to author content early on in the pre-construction process. Ultimately, they need to aggregate that data somewhere to visualize it, right? Which is where we sit necessarily. We're not necessarily playing in authoring. Maybe one day. That's not where we sit right now. We sit in like the aggregator of information, unlocking BIM for everyone, so that the collective team has one place. And I think Tore said it, source of truth. And I know that's overused, but it's the reality, is like one source of truth to collect everybody's thoughts, leverage the collective knowledge, solve problems early in the pre-construction process, whether they're embodied carbon, whether it's constructability, whether it's cost, whether it's schedule, and making sure everybody's aligned so that you can execute with predictability in construction, reducing those overruns that Tore talked about. And I would say, it said, are you moving more left or right? ultimately, like, it's to allow us to have that golden thread where you click a door and you know the entire story of a door at the end of the day, because you've carried that asset through the life cycle of the project, and now you're handing over to an owner this robust, model for operations. And the great thing about it is that the people that were touching the model along the way didn't really know they were touching the model, or adding that metadata, or adding that information along the way. So it's almost like this, wait a second, when I click on that air handling unit, I have all of these inspections and observations and submittals and schedule and cost and budget. And they didn't realize that they had just created this robust asset at the end of the day. And so for us, like, I agree somewhat, but I think that's where I would say it's a little different. Like, we're not necessarily doing these for authoring. We're doing it so that we don't care where you authored, but we're the aggregator of the information so that you can then leverage it across the life cycle of project and ultimately into operations.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely there. Like, that's what we've been seeing in these like super complex, huge projects in Norway. Like, we have the world's longest undersea tunnel in NoVRender. That's an example. And what you're seeing in these really large, complex projects, there isn't one authoring tool. They're not using one tool to author the tunnel and then the same tool to author the roads and then the same tools to do the water and drainage and all that. They're different in a normal project, because in NoVRender you often federate in models from a lot of different sources, right? Normally you have all of the major players in a project. Like, you use one tool for the road, and then you use a really specialized tool for drainage, and then you use a really specialized tool for LiDAR for scanning, and then you use another tool for photo geometry of the terrain and so on. So what we really believe in it is kind of creating a platform that can ingest all of that data and make sense of it in one federated view, so that you can bring in your BIM model, you can bring in your GIS data, you can bring in your scan, so your survey information, and mold all of that together, so that you can make really, really good decisions because you have all of the data in one geospatial place. And I joined some of our customers. They had like a daily meetup. Like, if you're a coder, it's like a daily stand-up, but they would go through the model and plan the day's work. And they would use, of course, NoVRender for that, because NoVRender had all of the models from all of the disciplines in one single view. And they would open that up on a big screen and then go through their work. And kind of one thing that we saw that they were able to do much more efficiently now than before, and actually became a slogan for NoVRender, was kind of create obvious solution for complex problems. Because historically, they would shuffle between 2 or 3 softwares. They would open the GIS software and then have a look at, maybe there was kind of this there's kind of this rock thing, and they were thinking, is this actually intruding with our railroad? And then they would go in and they would do some measurement points in the GIS tool, and then they would go back to the CAD tool and click kind of the same area, and they would see, is this number bigger than that? And so on. I think so, it might be. But when you just open up an overrun, you can see the rock and it's overhanging the railroad. So obviously you need to kind of do something about that, or else your train's going to hit it. So I think kind of the vision is kind of, as Dave went into, is kind of create this kind of huge repository where you kind of connect all the data. Not only BIM data, but GIS data, survey data. And what Dave is into is kind of connecting that up to workflows and asset management and safety and all that stuff, so that you kind of get everything in and you get it into a geospatial place, so that you can sit in a meeting and everyone's on the same page. Like, nobody can argue that we need to do something about that rock that's overhanging the train road, where just a couple of months ago, before they started using NoVRender, they will go back and forth for days on that thing.
Try and load it.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Thanks, guys. I'm just gonna change the subject slightly, because Dave, I think it'd be interesting to cover this point. Then we can go back into a bit more on the BIM front. But Dave, your background, you was at McCarthy and Brasfield and Gorey. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. I'm curious, how is did that experience shape your approach to leading the product at Procore in the BIM world? Like, were there frustrations? Was there like, are there certain things that you learned back then that you think like are really critical to how you run your day to day now?
Yeah, I think before that I was a laborer, and I've always been around construction, and I had studied CAD and drafting in high school, but I just didn't go to college for that. I also dropped out of college, but I went back. But I knew that I love the building process and construction. I also love technology, and I think if it weren't for Brassfield and Gory, we wouldn't be on this call right now. Like, I think that's where my eyes were opened of just like, hang on a second, because I was in the master's program, I was studying, and my emphasis was in BIM and sustainable construction. Went to Brassfield, and one of my first jobs was like reviewing the submittals of shop drawings, and I was like, hang on a second, so the engineer's drawing this set, and then the specialty contractor is drawing this set, but they kind of look the same, but they're like the same content. And then like, what if they were just like this? It seems very wasteful.
Too
like,
obvious.
I'm not following here. Like, there's two sets of drawings, but they're the same drawings. And they're like, well, they're not the same drawings. They're actually different drawings. And you're like, but they kind of look the same. And so there're just so many things as I was learning like that. And then it was the very beginnings of BIM. And so I was fortunate enough to be on a data center with Brassfield at the very beginnings, and we did everything. It was like Latista days, and there was no iPad. It was just taken, and there were so many lessons learned of like how much more efficient we could be by using the model out in the field and building off of the model, and how productive we were. I was hooked. I was like, everyone needs to know about BIM. This is it. Like, this is it for me. I'm like, this is going to be my focus. And that's why I chased it to the West Coast to join McCarthy. I chased sustainability and tech to McCarthy on the West Coast because that's where it was happening, and that's what led ultimately to here. So I would say, how did those shape me into kind of where we are? I mean, like, I think it was eye-opening to come into the industry, into one of these large GCs, and realize the opportunity and just be like, it's so obvious. Like, people need to be leveraging this tech. How can I help the industry leverage this tech? So, yeah,
that's one of the things that I love about working with Dave, is that you kind of have a very deep understanding of kind of the users in the field and how they actually practically use the application to solve everyday problems, right? You're not just adding a button to add a feature, you're adding a button or something to solve a problem that somebody has in the field, and they want to do that efficiently and quickly, and they kind of give them exactly what they need when they need it. And that's kind of where I really fell in love with designing applications for 3D and 3D applications, because they're so dynamic applications. Like when you look at more like a forms-based applications where you tick some fields, you have some input fields, and then you kind of something else, that's a very like linear progression. But when you're designing a BIM application where it becomes really difficult, and this is kind of where I feel Dave does a better job than anyone I know, is kind of really understanding what the user is trying to achieve, but it's not a linear process often. It's kind of, they're doing a bit of this and then they want a bit of that. But when they're doing a bit of that, they need this tool, because then they definitely want to do a bit of this. And that's, it's really mind bending, because the user flows are so dynamic.
Yeah, talking about, maybe that's a good way to segue into the next question about like understanding the user. And I can imagine a major frustration of some people when they're trying to use BIM models in the field is how long it takes to load. And I think maybe, I can't remember what we were recording at the time, but like there would be instances where you'd have to go, if you had a BIM model, you'd have to go to a desktop to view it, which is just totally unideal if you're out like, I don't know, however many minutes walk away from your desk, where you're out on the field, you need quick answers and so on and so forth. So yeah, with NovaRender, does this enable people in the field to like instantly stream their, maybe, I don't know if instantly is the right term here, but like to quickly stream their models and like get quick answers, have better coordination and so on and so forth actually in the field?
Yeah, I can talk for kind of the 3D part, and then Dave maybe can go into more of the kind of product side. But NovaRender is inherently built very differently than the other viewers on the market, due to kind of the background and the experiences, and kind of going at this problem with fresh eyes, right, and just starting from scratch and trying to solve this underlying problem. So NovaRender is actually much more similar to YouTube than it is to Navisworks. So, or Google Maps. It's more similar to Google Maps or YouTube than it is to kind of these traditional viewers like Navisworks or Solibri or whatever. because how NoRender works is that it works by when you enter a model, you just load the part of the model that's actually visible for your virtual camera in that virtual 3D space. That's the only thing it's loading. It doesn't, what's outside your camera frustum, so what's kind of visible on your screen, it does not exist on your device. That information does not exist in memory, it doesn't exist anywhere. It just exists on the server. And then when you move that camera, the same way kind of when you skip a part in YouTube, you then kind of start loading that part of the model. And it's much more complex because on YouTube, it's just like time is your reference. But when you're in 3D, you have depth and you have a lot of like different parameters that you need to go at. But essentially, it's a streaming service for 3D data. If you boil it down to kind of the deep tech, that's what we unlock. And that's why it's so damn fast. Because we're not processing the same data that everyone else is processing. If they have a 100 gig BIM model, they're processing 100 gigs of data. We're processing maybe like less than a percentage, maybe a fraction of a percentage, even because that's what's currently on screen. You don't need anything else. It's not visible for you. It's like if I'm sitting in this room and I'm looking at this wall, it doesn't matter to me what's behind that wall because I can't perceive it. But if I hide that wall in the BIM model, then of course I need to load it, right? So it's kind of all about kind of giving the part of the model that the user actually needs when he needs it. Yeah.
Very smart. Okay. Cool. Yeah, Dave, okay, so with this, what's the plan to determine whether like such a acquisition or of NovaRender is a success? Are you looking at like growing adoption of BIM with like for perhaps new people adopting it? Or are you looking for like more usage within the existing customer base? Like what does success mean?
That's a loaded question. I mean, yes to all of those things, obviously. I think there's also a bit of a success factor in that when I look at, as we're talking about this challenge of like opening files or like supporting any size, any type, anywhere in the world. Maybe I'll give a story. I was out on a job site, one of these big data centers, and the construction's really interesting. It was an H-shaped structure, and the way that the data center is built, because energy is a really important thing of like how do you save energy, is that the entire thing, the whole entire building, it was 2 stories, the 4 football fields, so 400 yards long. Air comes in one side, and it's just a big plenum, right? It's just a huge plenum space of airflow. And so one of the things that teams are having to do with different applications, including ours currently, is they have to break it up by floor or by like zone. So they may have the center of the H is one project or one model, and they have like level 1 is another model, and then level 2 is another model. And when I was out there looking at the design and looking at this building, I was like, it's one system. Like the whole thing is a system. It's a plenum. Like you need to coordinate the entire thing. You can't coordinate. You really shouldn't be coordinating this in pieces. And these data centers are becoming this combination of almost like horizontal meets vertical construction. And so success is that you're not breaking up models anymore. You know, success is that teams are able to coordinate the entire picture, not just like, okay, well, let me look at this one piece of the building and then this one piece of the or project or road or whatever, and then this one piece of the road. We're allowing teams to coordinate what they need to achieve predictability, right? And so I would say there's a number of those factors, like, yes, more revenue, more people, like more company, like more BIM, like let's go from 30 to 60% adoption and get a bunch of cross sell. Yeah, that's great. But I think ultimately success is like when I hear customers say like, I loaded the entire thing and was able to coordinate the entire project for the first time ever.
For smiles
I'll
on
be like,
people's faces.
Hey, Tore, let's pop some champagne.
Yeah.
Like we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's just good. I guess it's easy from a business perspective to get like bogged down in the numbers and so on and so forth. But really, yeah, you want your users
want everything
to be
to go
smiling.
up into the
Yeah, always.
But ultimately,
it will if you do that.
Yeah, I want the number of models that people have to make to go like this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, other way. Fair enough.
But to your point there, when people start chopping up these models, they're actually creating even more problems because then you have all these intersection points. Like if a pipe goes from zone A to zone B and you've chopped it up, should it exist in zone A, B, both of them? Like it's like you're creating like a super mess. And we had one project here in Norway. It's like the world's longest. No, it's not even the world's longest, but it's probably the world's most expensive project per kilometer. Is like a super expensive subway station they're building in Norway, and they had split that thing up into 12 huge Navisworks files, and one of these Navisworks files is insane scale, and they had to split up into 12 of these, and these intersection points were just like a total mess. Nobody knew what's going on in those intersection points because different teams had different approaches on how, like, it just really got out of control. So that's why they swapped to NovaRender, so they can kind of get all of that in one view, so everybody's seeing and solving the same problems. It's very first principle. It's all about giving information so that people can make decisions.
Yeah. I mean, think about 1,200 acre site Vantage, site utilities, and how it's going to connect to all 10 of those data centers, right? Like, break that up into multiple models. Like, you can't do that. I mean, you can, but if you really want to achieve that predictability, you really need to have like it all loaded.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, Tore, maybe some lessons perhaps from your perspective about founding NovaRender and then obviously being acquired now by Procore. What do you think you've done right? Is there any advice that you can kind of give back to the community of people that are building products within not specifically BIM, but like construction technology?
I think kind of like the singular kind of most important advice I could give is obsess over the customer, the product, and what you're making, right? There's so many companies that are kind of focusing so much on kind of being at the right places. Like it could be expos, it could be interviews, it could be like sitting in the right location, like all of these kind of things that really don't actually matter for your end customers, and really obsessing over kind of how can we make this product even better for them to increase value for our customers, and obsess over that, and everything else will kind of follow, right? Where I see a lot of kind of being a founder has kind of become at least in Norway, it was really hyped for a period. Everybody wanted to be a founder, and everybody had their own business and did something, and people were more interested in kind of like not building a business, which is cool, but kind of being a founder than actually actually building a company and building a business. And I think if you really focus on the product, the customer, and building a business, and you don't care too much about what's going around you, like we were in the middle of COVID, we were through kind of one of the biggest droughts in capital for during COVID. Like there was all of these super noisy things that happened all around us, but we just really obsessed over customers, and we scaled much slower than how other startups kind of go through kind of this VC route. Kind of we do A, and then we pull in a lot of money, and then we need to get to B, and then we pull in money, and then we get to C. We weren't on that route. We're really lucky in having some really strong investors, local investors, long-term investors that really wanted to follow our journey at the pace that we wanted to do the journey at. Because there's a guy who wrote the book. His name is Moshid. He's a Norwegian guy about he has a PhD in startup in startup, and he did this huge study, and like what's the biggest determiner for if a company is successful or not, so a startup is successful or not, and it was timing that came out of it. And that's something you can't control at all, right? So it's kind of like, it's really awful, right? If you had an AI startup for like 10 years ago, like what would the valuation be compared to today? And you can't control that, right? But you can control your business. You can't control how you grow your business. So focus on what you can control and take control over that. And that's kind of where, if you look at it from outside India, maybe we went too slow. Maybe we could have done this. Maybe we could have done that. But we felt really successful in how we built that, and we brought a lot of value to our customers, and going into Procore and being able to extend that at a global scale is a huge success for at least me as a founder of NoVRender.
Yeah, no, very nice, very insightful. I would agree on the timing front. When we speak to people and they're the ones that have had like huge exits within the industry, there's always these moments of like where the timing is just spot on. It's perfect. Like either the iPad, actually the introduction of like Apple iPad was, I think it's even attributable to a lot of Procore success. So um it's just, yeah, I would tend to agree there. Dave, I don't know how much of like from the acquisition perspective you personally get involved with, but is there any thoughts from your perspective, like of when looking at companies like NovaRender, like what makes them a good, yeah, attractive to you and considering, oh, you know what, yeah, this is a company we should put our hands in our pocket for and buy. You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, and I'd love to get Tore's thought if we have time on this too. So I've been involved in 3. I was involved in the very first acquisition of Procore, which was a BIM related acquisition, BIM Anywhere. And then now 2 others, Flypaper and NovaRender. And I would say um, just listening to Tore talk about the customer centricity, I was like, there's a huge part of this that is the people. And if they align to your culture. And if Tue were on here, you'd hear him say his customer centricity. It's like customer focus. I say it a lot of times of like the best products are the ones we build together. I mean that. And so when I get on a call with Tore and he's like, it's all about our customers. And I'm like, yes, it is. And then he's like, and I want 3D for all. And I'm like, yes, that's right. I want 3D for all too. Like that's our mission right now. So you end up with these people that have this very shared passion and culture fit. And so it makes a lot of sense. Nick, builder, he's a generational builder and knows this space like he does. And the same thing existed with BIM Anywhere and going up there and meeting with that team during that first acquisition. So I'd say like one is knowing the percentage. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's somewhere around like 80% of acquisitions fail. You really need to make sure you got the people first. And that's a big part of it. The second I would say is like making sure you got a strategy in place to really vet and understand, is it a fit? Is it not? How is it gonna fit into the picture from a technical standpoint, from a feasibility standpoint? Will it really achieve the things that we want out of our strategy? And so there's more of like an aspect of that, and just making sure that you got team members on that you have the strategy in place and the team members involved in the diligence process to make sure that like you've checked as many boxes as you can to make sure this is right for everybody. And that goes on both sides. I think this is where I would love Tore's input on this is like, like you kind of start to open the kimono and like, hey, this is us. And you kind of have to do it on both sides a little bit to say like, is this going to be a fit? Right? Like this is where our gaps are. This is where your gaps are. Like, and making sure that you're really transparent, overly a little bit transparent during that diligence process, so that you're like, okay, we got the skeletons out. You know mine, I know yours. And this is how we're going to solve those once this deal happens, if it happens. And so I think in every single one of these that was understood. With Nick, it was a little different situation because we had partnered for 3 years. We knew everything. We had customer feedback on like telling us where the roadmap needs to be from post acquisition on. Like we because we have so many mutual customers at this point. With BIM Anywhere and NovaRender a little different, but I would say it's that would be my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. Insightful.
It's a really cool statistic, the one you said, that 8 out of 10 or 80% of them fail. I heard a slightly different one, but 7 out of 10 acquisitions fail is what I've heard.
Yeah.
But what's even more interesting is that it's only 1 out of 10 companies that have those 30% of successful acquisitions, right? So you have some companies that are really successful with acquisitions, but 9 out of 10 are not successful with acquisitions. And I believe, as to Dave's point, I think the biggest contributor to that I spoke to one of our first investors today, Kjell Skappel, and he brought that up. He's been through like tens of acquisitions, and what he has seen is that culture is actually the most important attribute to your long-term success, because it's actually like what you're acquiring, especially when it's a technology company and a deep technology company like NoVrender, now together with Procore. It's not only what you have today, but what you're going to build kind of going into the future, and that's where you're going to see those huge gains. So it's a really interesting statistics. Like 7 out of 10 acquisitions fail, and on 1 out of 10 companies, they have those 3 of 10 successful acquisitions, and they do it time after time.
Yeah, the odds are stacked against you, maybe. Tore, I'm curious about your thinking during the process of the acquisition. Was it stressful? And perhaps I can add some color to this question. We've spoke to people who have had acquisition offers on the table, and they have advice from their investors and peers in the group and say 90+% chance this never happens. Like, how do you deal with that like mental tension during the period of like receiving an offer, then going through the due diligence and wondering like, will this happen? Will this not happen? Is this what I want? So on and so forth.
It's definitely a rodeo, but I think the best acquisitions come when you actually are not kind of interested in selling the company. Kind of, you're just again focusing customers, building product, and all that. And kind of when Procore and Dave and then kind of the rest kind of followed up, we're discussing kind of going into partnerships, and we had all of these discussions over a very long period of time. It happens very slowly, and then it happens very quickly. Kind of, it's one of those things. If you've ever had a baby, your first baby, it's kind of like you can see your wife's pregnant, but it kind of moves pretty slowly. It seems like the baby's never going to come, and then everything happens at the same time. Kind of, it kind of feels a bit like this.
Life's
So
never
you
the
can kind
same,
of
man.
definitely see things are kind of progressing, and going to kind of see it's moving in direction. But when you go into the diligence process and all that, you better know that you want this, because going through the diligence process is it's difficult, and it's very mentally draining for me as a founder, but also for the company, right? When you're a small company working with a really big company, the big company has a lot of resources, you have very little resources, and to run a successful small company, you need to be very deliberate on how you kind of what you use those little resources you have for, so you can build great things. So when you go into kind of doing the diligence process and going into a process with a company, you also need to do that wholeheartedly, the same way you would kind of do your other efforts. But it's a very demanding process to go through, definitely. Just the amount of like work that needs to happen, and time zones, and expectations for investors, for employees, and all these things need to be managed. But it's definitely an experience that you take with you. And Procore is really, really good. Like, Procore is very professional and has like a very professional M&A team that also respects that we're a small company, we don't have the same resources. They also respect that, hey, this is a very big deal for the company, like for me as a founder, for the people involved in the deal. Where for the M&A team, that's like every day they do this all day, all night, right? So you have these like very different. There are big differences in kind of experience on both sides. And going back to that labor story, it's kind of it also kind of it's something that I've spoken to a couple of times, where it's kind of like when you go into labor, you have this labor nurse, right? And this is like once in a lifetime the most important thing in your life, kind of. And then you have this like labor nurse that does this every day,
it's like
all
the
day,
sixth baby of the day, yeah.
yeah, right. It's baby of the day, or maybe like maybe it's like baby 1 out of 3 this shift, right? So well, Procore was really professional and being able to kind of coach us through that a bit and kind of help us and really understand the psychology and how it is to be on the other side of that table. So to me, it was a really like stressful in a good way process, where it's demanding. It requires a lot of work and a lot of things you need to do. But it was also a really pleasant process. I don't think, at least what I've heard from our investors who has been a part of acquisitions many times, I think the process with Procore was one of or the most clean process that he's ever been a part of, and just the share mutual respect and the joint forces of culture, where we wanted to bring the product, how we take care of our people, our employees, that's built up this company, and kind of all that. So it was a very pleasant, stressful but pleasant process to go through.
Yeah, nice, great to hear. Okay, last couple of questions. This one's for you, Dave. Yeah, I mean, it's very open and generic, but you're obviously like spreading the message at the moment, trying to get your users like more involved with usage of BIM. So is there anything you would say to them right now? Perhaps they're not aware, perhaps they're thinking about BIM and they haven't, and the acquisition now, NovaRender and Flypaper enables like an easier adoption, so on and so forth. I'll just leave the rest to you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for the customers that have been with us on this journey, look, we heard you, and this is a sign of that. Like, we heard the things that you desired and the roadmap, and it didn't go unnoticed, right? We're making these big investments because of our customer base, and they've told us we need you to support us on these large projects, and so that's why we're on this call right now, is because we did listen to the current customers. And I would say for anybody that's not a customer and prospect, it's like, yeah, you should take a look. And you should know what's coming, because we do have pretty big ambitions for what we want to accomplish here, and how we want to support the industry, and how we want to change the industry, and how we think about them, and being that ultimate aggregator of information, and being able to connect it across the entire platform to streamline the different workflows across the entire life cycle of a project. So yeah, give us a call. We're always happy to jump on a call and like walk you through the current product, the future product, where we're heading with it, and get feedback from you. And anybody that is a customer of BIM knows that too. So the door's always open for us to get on those calls and get feedback. So
Nice. Okay, very last question for you both. What I'm trying to, should I focus this on BIM, or should I focus? Okay, you take it how you want. You can either respond in terms of BIM, or just in general AEC, construction technology, so on and so forth. So, yeah, what's your predictions? What should people be preparing for? Where are we heading?
It's a big question.
Very
Where are we
open.
at?
Take it as you wish.
Well, one thing that I've been seeing, and specifically from the Nordics, where we kind of have this BIM mandate, is that clients that kind of, and both engineering firms and GCs that really embrace talking to BIM now, and really go into it at kind of a depth where they truly understand it. Those customers and those GCs, they have a huge competitive advantage. The way we are working with our GCs, because we support them very thoroughly, because BIM was new for a lot of our customers, and we went through it, and the way it's changed the way they monitor progress, the way they're able to pull in survey data and overlay that over the BIM data, so they can actually see, are they building within tolerance, the way they are kind of calculating jobs to take and the price and all that. It's radically changed the way they do that now, because they can go into so much more and lower level detail than they ever could. Because as we all know, construction is a pretty low, what would the English word be like? It's a low margin business, right? So it's big money, like $1 trillion industry, but it's low margin. And getting those margins right is what I really think BIM unlocks today. But it's even going to get so much better when you can connect BIM to the Procore platform, where you can get in your all of your tickets, your scheduling, your procurement, your asset management, and all of that stuff into kind of one cohesive solution, so that everything can be understood as a whole, which it is. It's a whole thing, right? And it should actually be viewed as a whole. I think that's kind of where you'll see that you can take this low margin business and increase that margin, or increase the efficiency in how we build, so it reduces the cost of building these huge assets, which is a huge gain for everyone in the world. Dave?
Awesome.
Such a loaded question. I've had all this time to think about it too.
Man, I would, honestly, if someone asked me this question, I would be like, what the fuck?
Well, yeah, I mean, one part of me goes to like, I recently went back to Birmingham, Alabama, my hometown, to go visit with some customers and do a community event. On the flight back, I rewatched The Matrix, and I was like, this is scary. When like Morpheus is sitting with him and telling him what happened. like why the matrix exists and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Transcendence also comes to mind of like, oh, is this where we're going? But no, I think as it relates to the products, it's really, it's interesting because I do think the ability to do authoring and like create models, and you think about this in the software development phase right now too, like you can get in any of these products, whether it's V0 or Cursor, like, and you're getting like junior level engineering just by natural language. Like, hey, I want this thing to do this, and it like codes it for you. And you're seeing the same thing happen with BIM. Like, I want a 3-story building, and I want to do, and whoop, here it is, and it gets you to that like pretty firmly into that like SD to DD phase. But it's not going to be long before it's getting you to CD levels, is what I would think. And so you're going to get this point where it feels like where you're going to be able to create very rapidly create construction level documents faster than you've ever been able to create them. And there's going to be, I think, if everything goes to plan, which is, I think, the promise that a decade ago with BIM was like, we'll build off the model. And people are kind of building off the model, but the contract is not the model. But I do think we're in this interesting spot where that may change, and it may change pretty rapidly of like, hang on, the model, we can build off the model. Like, it is the source of truth. It is the thing that like we should be reviewing day in and day out, like we're reviewing these exported PDFs. And I think that we are in an interesting spot where like, because of the speed at which you can iterate, the level of detail that you're able to produce very quickly, you can start to like use the model as the thing that you build off, that you coordinate off, that you permit off. And we talked about it a long time ago, but it's like, it's kind of getting there. And I'll date myself, but like, I feel like it's like a Doc Brown quote, like, where we're going, there are no roads. Like, I feel like where we're going, there are no drawings. Like, if it all works out, like, there's a world where like, oh, y'all exported this, like, just the architectural PDF and just the structural PDF and just the mechanical PDF. Like, shouldn't you just like have the first floor PDF? Like, or, like, I think it's an interesting spot where we're getting to with the technology, and the idea that you could actually build off the model. You could actually be the permit that goes out, and arguably should. So
okay, all right, Dave, Tore, thank you so much. Looking forward to following Procore's domination of the BIM space in the next few years.
Owen, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
It's real fun.
Cheers.